Welcome to our comprehensive analysis. Today, we are undertaking a thorough investigation into a case that sits at the absolute intersection of true crime, digital misinformation, and global geopolitics.
Exactly.
For you, the listener joining us as our silent third partner in this study session, the stakes of what we are about to discuss are, well, they're incredibly high. We are examining the life, the tragic death, and the massive informational aftermath surrounding a 27-year-old Democratic National Committee employee named Seth Rich.
And it is so much more than just a timeline.
Right. This is not just a recounting of an unsolved case. This is a masterclass in how modern information flows actually function. It demonstrates precisely how digital narratives are constructed, deconstructed, and weaponized in the current times.
It really does.
Ultimately, it shows how a single human life and a family's profoundly personal tragedy can be entirely overtaken by global political forces and automated internet algorithms. We will be drawing extensively from our foundational source text, relying on the public intelligence database and the primary compiled records to walk you through every documented detail.
Before we proceed any further, it is absolutely essential to establish the strict parameters of this comprehensive analysis. The source materials we are utilizing today contain highly politically charged content.
Yes, very much so.
This encompasses statements, actions, and media coverage involving both left-wing and right-wing media networks, political figures, and international intelligence agencies. I want to emphasize to you, the listener, that we are impartially reporting the contents of the source text.
We are not taking any sides.
Exactly. We are not endorsing any viewpoints, political or otherwise. Our mandate is strictly to convey the facts exactly as they have been documented and verified in the primary compiled record. The tone of our discussion will remain strictly objective, earnest, respectful, and factual throughout the entirety of this session.
Okay, let's unpack this by starting at the very beginning. Because before Seth Rich became a fixture in international news headlines, he was a young man with a distinct background and very clear ambitions.
He was.
If we look at the biographical details carefully, we see a portrait of someone highly motivated by civic duty. Seth Rich grew up in a Jewish family in Omaha, Nebraska. According to the compiled records, he was raised with a very deep-seated desire to, as those who knew him described it, try to save the world.
And that wasn't just a passive sentiment. We see it translating directly into his academic and early career milestones, don't we?
We really do.
The trajectory is highly consistent. In 2011, he graduated from Creighton University with a degree in political science. From there, the foundational source text outlines a clear path of civic engagement.
Right.
He volunteered for the Nebraska Democratic Party. He secured an internship with Senator Ben Nelson. He worked directly with the United States Census Bureau, and he was actively engaged in Jewish outreach programs within his local community.
This background is crucial for you to understand because it establishes exactly who he was professionally before he ever moved to the nation's capital. When he did transition to Washington, D.C., his initial employment was with the polling firm Greenberg, Quinlan, Rosner.
Which was a significant stepping stone.
Right. And that leads us to 2014, which is when he secured a position at the Democratic National Committee. And I want to pause here because we really need to detail his exact title and his specific responsibilities at the DNC. This directly addresses so many of the narratives that surfaced later.
It's a foundational point.
His official title was Voter Expansion Data Director. So for the listener who might not know what the day-to-day of a political data director looks like, what did that role actually entail? I mean, did that mean he had high-level access to the DNC's private servers and classified communications?
Actually, no. And that is a fundamental distinction that the primary compiled records make clear. His job involved the development of a computer application designed to help voters locate their polling stations.
A voter lookup tool.
Yes. When you look at what that requires technically, it is fundamentally about database management, digital mapping, and user interface development. It is about creating front-end applications to assist everyday citizens in the physical voting process.
Right.
The record explicitly notes that his co-workers, including data scientist Andrew Theriot, who mentored Rich, specifically clarified his technical capabilities.
Which means what exactly in the context of the claims that would later surround him?
Well, it means that while Rich was working as a programmer for voter applications, he did not possess a programming background that would equate to being an expert computer hacker.
That's a huge distinction.
Furthermore, the documented facts from the DNC and subsequent investigations confirm he did not have access to the DNC server's private emails. He was focused on front-end voter expansion, not back-end network security. Establishing that baseline of his actual documented day-to-day work is entirely necessary before we move forward into the timeline of the tragedy itself.
I agree completely. We need to transition to the events of July 10th, 2016, and we approach this timeline with the utmost gravity and respect. We want to provide you with the forensic and investigative details to create an immersive, factual recounting.
It is important to be precise here.
Let's begin with the night before, tracking his documented movements. Seth Rich was a regular customer at Lou City Bar, which is a sports pub located in the Columbia Heights neighborhood of Washington, D.C. For geographical context, this establishment is located approximately 1.8 miles from his apartment.
The records indicate that he left the bar around closing time.
Right, placing his departure between 1:30 and 1:45 in the morning.
There's a gap in the timeline as he made his way home, which is standard in investigations of this nature before the incident occurs. We advance the timeline to 4:20 in the morning.
The location being the southwest corner of Flagler Place and W Street Northwest.
Situated in the Bloomingdale neighborhood. This location is about a single block away from his residence. At precisely 4:20 a.m., an automated gunfire locator system alerted the Metropolitan Police Department of the District of Columbia.
For you listening, it is helpful to understand what that technology is.
Yes, the acoustic sensors.
These systems utilize a network of highly calibrated acoustic sensors placed throughout a city. When a loud noise occurs, the sensors measure the sound waves to determine if it is a gunshot, and if it is, they triangulate the exact GPS location of the sound and instantly alert law enforcement dispatch.
And because of that automated alert, police officers were able to arrive at the scene incredibly fast.
The compiled records show they arrived in less than 1 minute.
When the officers arrived, they found Seth Rich conscious. He had sustained 2 gunshot wounds to the back.
He was immediately transported to a nearby hospital where he passed away approximately an hour and a half later.
The investigative details documented by the Metropolitan Police Department characterize the event as a botched robbery attempt. To understand why investigators reached that conclusion, we have to look at the context provided in the public intelligence database.
Right, the neighborhood context.
It notes that residents had reported the Bloomingdale neighborhood had been plagued by a series of armed robberies during that specific period in 2016.
But the forensic details from the scene also present a complex picture, which understandably caused immense anguish for the family. Crucially, the perpetrators did not actually take his valuables.
They left everything.
His watch, his wallet, and his credit cards were all left on his person. His mother later provided a heart-wrenching statement to the local television station WRC-TV, detailing the physical evidence of a struggle.
She noted that his hands were bruised.
His knees were bruised, and his face was bruised. She expressed the agonizing confusion of the situation, stating that there had clearly been a physical struggle, he was shot twice, and yet they did not take anything. I ask you to imagine the profound confusion and grief of the family during this immediate aftermath. It is unimaginable.
It is entirely devastating. From a purely investigative standpoint, law enforcement and forensic analysts look very closely at the nature of those wounds and the signs of that struggle.
What did they find?
The foundational source text notes a highly significant forensic detail, the fact that he was shot in the back and not in the head. This specific detail is cited by local police and independent analysts as direct evidence against the shooting being a professional assassination.
Because of the messy nature of the altercation.
Professional, targeted hits do not typically involve extended physical fistfights resulting in bruised knees and hands, nor do they typically end with shots to the back as the victim or assailant is moving.
So the working theory remained consistent.
The working theory maintained by the local police was that it was an attempted street robbery that escalated into a physical altercation, culminating in the fatal shots, after which the panicked assailants fled the scene without taking the time to search his pockets for property.
And there was surveillance footage, right?
Yes. The police informed the family that they had recovered surveillance footage from the area. This footage showed a brief, obscured glimpse of the legs of 2 people who were considered potential suspects fleeing the scene.
When an investigation like this remains unsolved, it creates an absolute information void. And as we will see in the modern era, that vacuum is very quickly filled. First, we see the official period of mourning.
Which is very public.
The day after the shooting, DNC Chair Debbie Wasserman Schultz issued a formal statement mourning his loss, specifically praising his dedicated work in supporting voter rights. 2 days later, Hillary Clinton referenced Seth Rich during a speech advocating for limits on the availability of guns.
We also see permanent memorials established in his honor.
By October of 2016, a plaque and a dedicated bike rack were installed outside the DNC headquarters to memorialize his daily commute. And in February of 2017, the Beth El Synagogue in Omaha named an existing summer camp scholarship after him, ensuring his legacy lived on in his hometown community.
However, alongside those earnest memorials, the investigation itself began to attract significant financial involvement from various external parties.
The reward money.
This influx of reward money fundamentally complicated the landscape of the case. The Metropolitan Police Department posted its customary reward of $25,000 for information leading to a conviction. This is standard operating procedure for the local police in unsolved homicides.
But then the situation began to shift.
Dramatically. On August 9, 2016, the international document publishing organization founded by Julian Assange announced a $20,000 reward for information regarding the murder.
And that is a massive pivot point. How did the family react to that, and what was the organization's stated reasoning?
The Rich family stated they were unable to verify this reward offer, as it came outside of official law enforcement channels. Furthermore, the organization later issued statements emphasizing that this financial offer should not be taken, as implying that Rich had ever been a source for their operations.
But the financial escalation did not stop there.
No, it didn't. In November of 2016, Republican lobbyist Jack Berkman announced he was personally offering a $100,000 reward. He subsequently added another $5,000 in December and an additional $25,000 in January, bringing his total offered reward to $130,000.
Berkman publicly stated his hope that the money would help get to the truth and either debunk the emerging online theories or validate them.
Meanwhile, the family was trying to maintain control over the search for their son's killers.
On March 19, 2017, Seth's brother, Aaron Rich, initiated a GoFundMe campaign. The goal was to raise $200,000 to fund a private investigation, coordinate public outreach activities, and establish the family's own dedicated reward fund, independent of political operatives.
That independence was very important to them.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We need to examine the timeline of the digital anomalies and the geopolitical maneuvering that began to surround this local homicide case. According to the compiled record, political rumors and racially charged comments began appearing on social media literally the day after his death.
Within days, theories began circulating on internet forums,
including claims connecting his murder directly to the DNC email leak or the FBI's investigation into the Clinton Foundation. The website Heat Street reported on discussions occurring on the Reddit forum known as The Donald, and these theories were further popularized by political advisor Roger Stone via his public Twitter account.
To understand the origin and the mechanics of this altered narrative, we must look at the findings of British journalist Duncan Campbell and the comprehensive documentation within the Mueller report.
The primary compiled record is very clear on this.
The Public Intelligence Database documents that Russian military intelligence, specifically the agency known as the GRU, actively worked to implicate Seth Rich as the source of the stolen DNC emails. We have to look at the documented motivation here. The goal was to draw attention away from themselves as the actual perpetrators of the cyber theft.
How exactly did they execute that from a technical standpoint? Because this is where the manipulation of raw data becomes central to the story.
The GRU executed this by manipulating the metadata of the files. Date stamps on the stolen DNC files were deliberately altered to show the data had been obtained on July 5th, 2016.
For context, this date is exactly 5 days before Rich's death.
Furthermore, the time zone on the files was changed to Eastern Time, which is the time zone that encompasses Washington, D.C. The persona known as Guccifer 2.0, which intelligence reports identified as a GRU front, then began claiming that Rich had been their source.
So by altering the timestamps and the time zones, they were creating a digital breadcrumb trail that pointed directly to an insider working at the DNC headquarters, rather than a foreign intelligence hack.
Precisely. Because of those manipulated dates, some analysts initially concluded the emails had been copied locally, perhaps, onto a physical USB drive from inside the DNC offices, rather than hacked remotely across international borders.
But the timeline documented in the Mueller report reveals a critical, undeniable contradiction in that narrative.
We have to look at the exact digital exchange of the files. The International Transparency Organization actually received an encrypted file from the Guccifer 2.0 persona on July 14th.
And the foundational source text is very specific about the name of that file, isn't it? It was named WKDNC link1.txt.gpg. I think it is important to explain to you, the listener, what that means. That .gpg extension signifies that the file was heavily encrypted. It is essentially a digital lockbox used for secure communication.
That is correct. It is a secure transfer protocol. And the most vital fact is the date the Transparency Organization received this encrypted file from Gusper 2.0 on July 14th.
That is 4 days after Seth Rich was murdered on the streets of Washington, D.C.
Mike Gottlieb, an attorney representing the Rich family, pointed directly to this timeline. He described the chronology of receiving the files 4 days post-mortem as entirely damning evidence against the fabricated narrative that Rich was the leaker. It is physically impossible for a deceased individual to execute an encrypted file transfer 4 days after their passing.
We also must analyze the public actions of Julian Assange during this exact period. On August 9, 2016, Assange participated in an interview on Dutch television on the program Nieuwsuur.
During a broader discussion about the risks faced by sources.
Yes, Assange, unbidden and without being prompted by the interviewer, brought up the murder of Seth Rich. When the interviewer asked him directly if Rich was a source, Assange replied that they do not comment on who their sources are.
The compiled records highlight a severe discrepancy between those public statements and his private actions. Later, in April 2018, direct messages from the social media platform Twitter were revealed to the public.
These messages were very illuminating.
They showed that while Assange was publicly suggesting to global audiences that his organization had obtained the emails from Rich, he was simultaneously communicating behind the scenes with the Guccifer 2.0 persona, actively attempting to obtain more files. The subsequent reporting characterized this as a deliberate, coordinated effort to obscure the true Russian origin of the materials by shifting the world's focus onto the slain staffer.
As we move forward to observe the subsequent media coverage, we must maintain our absolute focus on the sequence of events, ensuring we document the timeline without editorializing on the media networks themselves. Analysts and journalists documented clear parallels between the spread of the Seth Rich narratives and the phenomenon known as Pizzagate.
For you listening, Pizzagate was a thoroughly debunked conspiracy theory that falsely claimed a Washington, D.C. pizzeria was the center of a political human trafficking ring.
The Public Intelligence Database notes that both instances utilized very similar digital mechanisms to spread.
They relied heavily on automated bot networks. A bot network is a series of automated social media accounts programmed to post, share, and amplify specific phrases simultaneously, creating the false illusion of widespread public consensus.
It makes a fringe idea look like a national conversation overnight.
Furthermore, both the Pizzagate narrative and the Seth Rich narrative employ the tactic of shifting the burden of proof. This means the promoters of the theories demanded that the authorities or the families involved disprove their baseless claims, rather than providing substantiated, verifiable evidence themselves.
And both narratives managed to cross traditional political lines.
They did, drawing in audiences from alt-right movements as well as certain segments of the political left who were distrustful of institutional power.
The media vortex surrounding this case intensified significantly in May of 2017. This brings us to the involvement of two individuals, Ed Witowski, who is described in the records as a Dallas financier and a frequent Fox News contributor, and Rod Wheeler, a former homicide detective and also a paid Fox News contributor.
The compiled record shows that Witowski approached the Rich family directly.
He offered to personally pay for Wheeler to investigate the murder on their behalf. The family, desperate for any progress in an unsolved case, gave Wheeler permission to investigate, though it is important to note they did not officially hire him themselves.
This arrangement culminated in a highly consequential broadcast on May 15, 2017. The local Fox affiliate in Washington, D.C., Fox 5 D.C., aired a report featuring claims made by Rod Wheeler.
On camera, Wheeler stated that there was tangible evidence linking Seth Rich to the leaked emails.
And he suggested that local and federal law enforcement agencies were engaged in a coordinated cover-up to hide this fact. The very next day, May 16th, the Fox News Network amplified this local report by running it as the lead story on their national website and providing extensive, repeated coverage on their national cable network.
The Fox News lead story explicitly claimed that Wheeler's assertions had been independently corroborated by a federal investigator who spoke directly to Fox News reporters.
But the collapse of this national story was immediate and comprehensive. Almost instantly, the Washington, D.C. Police Department, the mayor's office, the FBI, and the family spokesperson all publicly and categorically disputed the claims.
It is worth reiterating a vital point we established earlier. The FBI was never investigating the murder of Seth Rich. It remained purely a local homicide investigation under the strict jurisdiction of the Metropolitan Police Department. The mayor's spokesperson issued a statement saying the claims took fake news to a new level.
Facing this unified denial from every relevant investigative body, Rod Wheeler spoke to CNN later that exact same day, May 16th.
He admitted on the record that he actually possessed no physical evidence linking Rich to the leaks.
He stated that he had only learned about the supposed existence of this evidence from the Fox News reporter who was writing the national story. He was essentially quoting the reporter's unverified claims back to the network, which the network then broadcast as corroborating evidence.
The fallout from this uncorroborated reporting was massive. Brad Bauman, the spokesperson for the Rich family, heavily criticized the reporting for causing the family immense pain. Yet, despite the immediate debunking by local police, federal agencies, and the primary investigator himself, certain commentators, including Sean Hannity, Newt Gingrich, and Geraldo Rivera, continued to discuss the theories on air for the remainder of the week.
Because of this sustained coverage, significant corporate advertisers began pulling their marketing from Hannity's program.
The foundational source text explicitly lists these companies. We see major brands like Crown Plaza Hotels, Cars.com, Lisa Mattress, USAA, Peloton, and Casper Sleep, all withdrawing their advertisements amid the public controversy, though USAA later returned after receiving customer feedback.
In terms of a legal response to halt the spread of the claims, on May 19th, an attorney representing the Rich family sent a formal cease-and-desist letter directly to Rod Wheeler.
Following mounting public pressure, advertiser withdrawals, and the complete unraveling of the source's claims, Fox News officially retracted the story on May 23, 2017. They removed the original article from their website entirely.
In their formal statement, they noted that the article had not been initially subjected to the high degree of editorial scrutiny required for their reporting, and upon further review, it was found not to meet those standards.
Notably, the public record emphasizes that the network did not issue a public apology to the family, nor did they provide a detailed explanation of what specifically had failed in their editorial process to allow the story to be published in the first place.
We also see similar retractions occurring much later in the timeline. For instance, in 2019, Jerome Corsi and the organization InfoWars issued a formal apology and retracted a story that had promoted similar claims, officially acknowledging that the allegations they broadcast were not based on any independent factual knowledge. This raises an important question regarding how a family or any individual reclaims their narrative and their legacy through the judicial system once a falsehood has been so widely disseminated across the globe.
Let us thoroughly examine the series of complex legal battles that ensued. First, we have the lawsuit filed by Rod Wheeler himself.
In August 2017, Wheeler sued 21st Century Fox, the Fox News Channel, reporter Malia Zimmerman, and Ed Butowski. In his court filing, Wheeler alleged that the quotes attributed to him in the original written article had been completely fabricated by the reporter.
The specifics of Wheeler's lawsuit provide significant insight into the background operations of how this narrative was constructed. Wheeler alleged that the fabricated quotes were pushed by individuals within the White House to deflect public attention away from the ongoing federal investigation into Russian election interference.
The lawsuit included highly specific documentation.
It included text messages and voicemails from Ed Butowski. One text message from Butowski to Wheeler explicitly stated that the president had just read the article prior to publication and wanted it out immediately.
Another communication detailed in the lawsuit explicitly outlined the goal of the reporting. It stated the objective was to prove that the Russians did not hack the DNC and to put the Russian hacking story to rest permanently.
The filings also revealed that a meeting had taken place at the White House between Wheeler, Butowski, and then White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer prior to the story's publication.
However, despite these communications being entered into the record, the presiding judge dismissed Wheeler's lawsuit in August 2018. The judge ruled that there was a lack of concrete evidence proving that the network had manipulated audio recordings of his statements, which was the core of his specific legal claim.
While Wheeler's internal dispute was playing out in the courts, the Rich family was undertaking their own monumental legal fight for peace and accountability. Aaron Rich, Seth's brother filed a lawsuit against Ed Butowski, Matt Couch, the organization America First Media, and the Washington Times.
The lawsuit was based on publications suggesting Aaron played a role in the purported theft of DNC emails.
This legal action resulted in a settlement with the Washington Times in October 2018, which included a full retraction of the relevant articles and a formal printed apology to the family.
Furthermore, in an attempt to address the public directly and bypass the legal filtering, Seth's parents authored a deeply poignant op-ed in the Washington Post on May 23, 2017.
The title was absolute in its clarity. We're Seth Rich's parents. Stop politicizing our son's murder.
In the text, they pleaded with the public and purveyors of falsehoods to give them peace and to allow local law enforcement the necessary space to conduct the actual homicide investigation.
But the most prominent legal action in this entire saga was the lawsuit filed by the parents against Fox News, reporter Malia Zimmerman, and Ed Butowski in March 2018. The family alleged that the publication of the fabricated story constituted extreme and outrageous conduct, resulting in the intentional infliction of emotional distress upon them.
For you, the listener, it is helpful to understand what intentional infliction of emotional distress means in a legal context.
It is a very high bar to clear.
You have to prove that the conduct was so outrageous in character and so extreme in degree as to go beyond all possible bounds of decency.
And that high legal threshold is precisely why this lawsuit was initially dismissed by Judge George B. Daniels.
The judge ruled that under the strict standards of New York state law, while it was entirely reasonable for the grieving family to believe their son's death was being exploited for political purposes, defamatory statements made to news outlets fell short of the specific, extreme legal threshold required to prove intentional infliction of emotional distress against a public broadcaster.
But the legal journey did not end with that dismissal. The family showed immense stamina and appealed the decision. In September 2019, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit overturned the initial dismissal.
The appellate court ruled that the Rich family had plausibly alleged actions that amounted to a campaign of emotional torture.
This was a massive reversal. This reinstatement allowed the family to utilize information uncovered during the discovery phase of the dismissed Wheeler lawsuit to bolster their claims against the network's handling of the story.
The climax of this extensive, multi-year legal battle occurred in October 2020. Fox News reached a confidential settlement with the Rich family. While the exact financial terms of the settlement remain undisclosed due to a strict confidentiality provision, it was widely reported in the public intelligence database to be a seven-figure sum.
Crucially, as part of the settlement agreement, the actions against Malia Zimmerman and Ed Butowski were dismissed.
This legal maneuver effectively prevented the network's high-profile hosts, who had utilized their platforms to amplify the claims, from being forced to provide sworn public testimony in a federal court regarding their internal editorial practices and private communications.
In the present day, the legacy of this entire saga has been firmly cemented into our cultural memory. It has been the subject of extensive retrospective analysis as media scholars and journalists attempt to dissect how this happened.
This includes major documentaries such as the BBC's Conspiracy Files, Murder in Washington, broadcast in 2018, and the 2022 episode of the Netflix documentary series Web of Make-Believe, Death, Lies, and the Internet.
These productions aim to document the immense tragic gap between the reality of an unsolved local homicide and the sprawling digital mythology that was constructed over it.
If we connect all of this to the bigger picture, we are observing a profound and disturbing shift in the architecture of truth in the digital age. The events surrounding this case demonstrate a severe vulnerability in public discourse.
When raw data such as timestamps on encrypted files or local police dispatch reports can be seamlessly integrated with fabricated quotes and international geopolitical agendas, the result is a hybrid information environment that is exceedingly difficult for the average citizen to parse.
The coordinated altering of date stamps by foreign military intelligence, combined with domestic media networks willing to bypass standard editorial scrutiny to prioritize a specific sensational narrative, creates a perfect storm of misinformation.
It actively bypasses traditional fact-checking mechanisms because the automated distribution networks, the social media bots, and the anonymous forums operate infinitely faster than formal corrections or apologies can ever be issued. So what does this all mean? When we synthesize all of the compiled records we've examined today, we are left with a very stark, very human reality. A 27-year-old young man from Omaha, Nebraska, who simply wanted to build computer applications to help his fellow citizens find their local voting booths, became the involuntary center of an international cyber espionage cover-up narrative.
His life, his ambitions, and his tragic death were reduced to a mere data point, entirely manipulated to serve interests that had absolutely nothing to do with him or his grieving family.
It required immense legal stamina, millions of dollars, and years of relentless litigation in federal courts just to secure a basic retraction and a confidential settlement.
As we conclude this comprehensive analysis, I offer a final thought for you to consider, expanding on the concepts we have documented today. Consider the absolute permanence of digital narratives. Even when the highest appellate courts in the land settle matter, even when retractions are formally printed by international news organizations, and even when the origin of a falsehood is completely exposed by multiple independent intelligence investigations, the digital footprint of a rumor almost always outlives the truth.
The fabricated stories continue to exist in internet archives, in cached forum posts, and in the memories of those who consumed the initial sensational reports but never saw the subsequent quiet corrections.
As a consumer of information in the modern age, you are faced with a profound challenge. How do you trust your own memory and the media ecosystem you rely on when the internet never forgets a lie but rarely archives an apology?
Thanks for listening.